These are the Digital Dyans, a South African collective of internet-savvy gents. These are the Digital Dyans, a South African collective of internet-savvy gents from the ex-Hosa culture, not to be confused with X-Men. Although the pandemic separated us, they're still plugged in, and, as ex-Hosa men, ain't no mountain high enough to keep the content from getting to you. What's going on, gentlemen?
Chayo clear, you jure. Call me the gas on it goes with my footwear. Oh, got my little chain and you tube drip on a daily, you know that I do that. Bitch, chayo clear, you jure. Call me the gas on it goes with my footwear. Got my little chain and you tube drip on a daily, you know that I do that. Bitch, chayo.
Yes, indeed. It's another installment, and a special installment today. We've got a guest, Tyson Ngubeni, joining us. Thank you for joining us, Tyson.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
And as usual, I'm joined by the Mawisa brothers. I got it right this time, gents.
Hola, hola.
Yeah, and today we are going to be talking about the creative realm, and this is at the back of the post-COVID-19 discussions. They are those people who are creating the content like Tyson.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the consumption itself? We've talked about micro content. We talked about the fact that people were prospecting. Now it's time to look at Black Friday, perhaps. In terms of the content itself, what's your feeling in terms of, will it change? Will it be the same?
To be deadly honest, over and above everything, I feel like Tyson has been one of the cats that have capitalized the most from what happened during the lockdown period. And I mean, it just came from organic shooting of skits, and I'm very glad to have him here. I mean, I'm a fan of his.
Yeah.
And when it comes to during, post, and during and after, and where we are now in terms of COVID, it's very good to have an insight on exactly like what has transpired since, and where it comes to when it comes to internet personalities.
Interesting.
I mean, Drum has actually dubbed Tyson as
Nigga,
the internet's...
You read Drum, nigga?
That's like that. Sorry. Drum has actually dubbed Tyson as the internet's favorite comedian.
Oh.
And I mean, I saw this and...
Shout out.
Where? And it's just so... It's so like serendipitous in the way that his career has transpired from being a comedian. And I mean, we're going to talk more about that as we go along.
Sanele, what's your view before we get into the man and behind his thoughts?
Yeah, so I think just off the back of what Siya's saying, I think it was obviously a very unique period for us, and that we actually still are in. And I think it kind of forced people to find avenues to still be creative, and knowing that their usual sort of mediums of connecting with their consumers or the people that follow them weren't available to them. So trying to kind of pivot from that and find ways to still find your relevance, for you to still practice and show off your art, is something that I think was very good to look at. And for me, just like Siya said, like watching kind of the stuff that Tyson was doing, another person as well was Donovan Goliath, with some of the stuff that he was coming up with during the COVID period was very like interesting to watch, because I think for me, the thing about creativity is that it really, really comes to the fore once you have strict parameters. Once the gap for you is that small, that's where the real creativity comes.
It's very interesting that you talk about the parameters and limitations. How would you discern between the parameters? Maybe we'll come back to it. Yeah. So, Tyson, beyond our own pontification, for me, I think we've chatted before. We've got a bit of history.
Yeah.
I think for me, the important part is the readiness. Everyone thinks it happened when it happened, the COVID period itself. But give us a bit of a backstory in terms of your history academically, for example.
Yeah.
Some people might not even know that you are a comedian.
Yeah. It's interesting actually that you start off there, because it has been like a journey, and even before. I don't know how far back I should go. So when I finished school, I was desperate to go to like film school, but then. You know, the film school was like, if you ain't got no money, take your broke ass home. Money, take your broke ass home. You know what I mean? Yeah. We couldn't afford it and stuff like that. Yeah. So I'm just going to give you a truncated version. So 3 years in a call center, learning to speak kind of Dutch. So in terms of listening to people and voices and the interest there. It started probably as far back as like then. Literally trying to make my voice sound as Dutch as possible, because we were solving people's computer problems like over the phone. So they dial a number in the Netherlands. It was like this multinational tech company. The phone rings in Santon, you talk to me, I solve your computer problem on the spot or whatever. So in terms of the interest of playing vocally, that's when I was like, obviously at the time I wasn't doing it like with a conscious effort of like, ay, mo 2020 my figure, you locked down, like, you know what I mean. So there was that. Went to varsity, ended up like doing journalism and drama. Those are my two majors. Also did the journalism degree, did the drama honors as well, and then by the time lockdown has started, there's been experience in theater, a little bit of like stuff like on camera, some stand-up work, a lot of MCing work at like, you know, small events that are off the off the radar kind of thing. But, so there's a lot of things that have happened when people aren't like watching, you know what I mean.
I like that.
So that's
quiet money, that's that.
On that point, like I watched you on Showmax's Funny People Africa. And you spoke about how people have assumed your nationality in a kind of xenophobic way.
So a lot of people assume I'm not South African. A couple more tonight, it seems. And I'm used to it. But guys, I mean, it's weird. I mean, when people assume this, I go through like weird things. Like, I get mugged in English, guys.
And you speak now of like how you adopted accents in your call center. And it's just like, how like did the one come before the other? Was it like you picking up as you are a voice actor? Did that help, or did it influence the way like you dictated your career since then?
As I think as you start to learn and grow as a performer, you pick up these are probably the things that I'm like strong at, or these are the things that I want to maybe like explore more. So in terms of like the voice and character work being like a huge driving point, like I get very immersed in things that I watch. So like when I watch, even if it's on a computer screen, when I'm watching like a movie, like I'm in the world like completely, you know. And then also when I'm on my own, I'm always like playing, trying to find things like vocally, and trying to find what it starts like internally, like how does this voice kind of feel like, and if it feels real, then you do the work of fleshing out of okay, what's their name, what's their history, and stuff like. And that's, for example, how Bob was also like created like back then. But like to answer your question, the
stereotypes.
To get back like to that, it was essentially I was. I'm by far the darkest in my family then. I'm a struggling yellow bone. It's very, very simple. Everyone in my family, guys, is light skinned. I'm literally the black sheep. And so there's always been that sense of like being.
I've got a friend actually, and I love her to death, and she's confident, but her mom realized she needed to work at her confidence, and our people tend to be very. They lack a lot of tact. Tend to be tactless. So they'll call literally umdana mnyaman.
And
like,
same
what
thing.
The hell?
And you know how it is, like a lokshin.
You
know what I mean? Growing up, it's like it's one of those things, and I think I still am. I'm an introvert, like at heart, but I was very, very sensitive kid, so I'd cry easily and stuff. So sometimes I wouldn't cry, like they'd say these things, and I'd go home and like cry there, or whatever. So
quite smart.
so there was that, and then the older I got, the complexion wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't going to grow out of it. And then it started becoming a case of people just assuming you're not like South African and stuff. And then because I'm 32 now, so in 2008, the first huge flare-ups of xenophobic violence, I was like 20, and at the time, like my mom would get like really really worried. It's like, oh, how many idea come like, you know what I mean? I was like, oh, come on, am I really gonna? And then it was at that time where people were like, yinle, you know what I mean? Remember that?
It was so stupid.
Yeah,
That's
it was
wild, actually.
during that time. So I'd move around, and there was a period of time when I'd literally walk into a space and I'd almost, and I used to joke about this in like my stand up, but I'd almost want to preempt and like and prove my South Africanness even before, you know what I mean? I walk into a room, hey, just unprovoked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There used to be like a time where I'd want to kind of prove, especially if I was walking in a room with like black people or whatever, but like when I started getting into stand-up comedy, which is probably about a year, when I sampled it was the year before I went to Rhodes, like just dipped my toes. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And then by the time I started looking more, because with stand-up comedy, usually the best ones are able to speak to like universal truths, right?
Yes.
But then the strongest truth I could speak to when I really wanted to do something that connects was like turn the lens inwards. What's my truth?
Yeah.
Then I was like, okay, the darkest person in the family and how that relates socially and so I start very personal and I make like self-deprecating jokes. And what was the opening line? Like, my complexion is between like Wesley Snipes and Eternal Darkness. Guys, you have to understand, my complexion, it lies like somewhere between like black coffee and eternal darkness, you know what I mean? Somewhere here.
That was
So I started with like that and self-deprecating, and then I started to say when I got older, this is how like the world started to see. This is how I started to move in the world
and navigate.
And that became a show called The Dark Ages at the National Arts Festival.
Have you had dark people coming up to you and being like, listen, people of dark complexion, rather, coming up to you and saying, listen, shout outs, thank you, that helped me a lot? What kind of discussions and engagements have you had?
Actually, that's very interesting. Sometimes it happened at the arts festival, the show that I did. I don't know, because I do it in a way, obviously it wasn't necessarily like I'm hyper aware of like tone and not being like malicious and not punching down kind of thing, as they say in comedy. So some people would say like, yeah, actually that was a celebration of our complexion and stuff like that.
A celebration of fellow dogs.
You know, so so some people like would kind of like appreciate Guti. And also it's like they'd find it like interesting, Guti. Oh, I never really thought Guti I'd watch a set about literally just about that.
So coming from like obviously your comedic background, you somehow found a way to pivot yourself onto the internet. And I mean, for me, I just remember the Stop Nonsense video.
What you're looking at is not a wall. It's a stop nonsense. A South African engineering phenomenon which dates back millennia. See, it turns out that on the other side of this structure is nonsense. A burglar? Nonsense. Your neighbor's snot-nosed kid throwing a ball over the wall. That's nonsense too. And it's kept out by this year. You see, it's made out of anti-nonsense compounds found only in the southern parts of Africa. A certain American politician wanted to build one of these along the southern border, but South Africa said no. Back to you in studio, Simon.
Yeah.
That came up, and it's just like, where, like, I have a, like, how did that even come around?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Those
How did Bob O'Connor land on our screens, on our phones, on our desktops, everywhere?
It was a church thing. Like, they were like, they called on a Saturday. They're like, look, we're thinking of doing this thing for like young adults. Everyone's like at home and cooped up. Do you want to like tell some jokes on a camera on Saturday? They called me on a Monday, I think. And I was like, 5 days is a short like period of time. What I you know what I mean?
The deadlines are tight.
To write something that would be half decent. Yeah. So I thought I'd probably do a better job if it was in skit format. So I was like, okay, cool. Just came up with a news parody thing. I used the ironing board as my news desk. I had my laptop there. So there were multiple characters, right? And it opened. I found stock footage. I created.
So
I'll probably put the whole thing out because that little that stop nonsense was probably 40 seconds of like a 6 minute long news parody thing.
Yeah.
I haven't like released that to like the general public, but I'll probably put it all
coming
out
soon.
And speaking of like, because obviously Bob is like a field reporter
in
the shape of form of how he's presented to us.
Yeah.
But I did realize that like back in the day, you did a show called Indaba Zabantu.
yeah. very good evening to you and welcome to Indaba Zabantu Prime Time. My name is Tyson Ngubeni. Our top story at this hour, horror plagues the residents of Somerset Heights as a street lamp suddenly stops working. We have our senior correspondent Carrie Fraser on the scene. Carrie, what is the situation at the moment?
Which is when you were the news anchor for that, and you also had field reporters there.
Yes, yeah.
Like, isn't it like funny how it all comes back, kind of?
It really is wild, yeah. So that was from I think it was my third year at Rhodes. No, my fourth year at Rhodes. And that Indaba Zabantu thing was, I think they had to do, the third year journalism students, they each had like to do some sort of like a creative project, and then they were like, oh, let's do like a little quirky news parody. And then they knew me, like I was both a journalism student and I was in the drama department, so they're like, oh, could you please be the anchor and stuff. So I was like, okay, cool. And then they also, you know, had like this whole production thing, and I remember the day, and then took on this whole serious news persona. Top story.
And that voice is impeccable.
Dude, it is impeccable.
So I just wanted to ask, how do you now, where you find yourself in, how do you now sort of navigate the brand space that you find yourself in, being on TV ads, etc.? Because I'm interested to know, like, once that starts happening and it's part of your career, how do you strategize for yourself in terms of how you want to position yourself and be like, I'll work with this brand, I won't work with this brand, and how is that something that you plot and plan and say, okay, cool, if this works for me and what I've positioned myself to my audience, then obviously that will be something I work in. And for me, like I saw you on the Light Show, and I think for me it was one of those things where I was like, I hope that people actually understood that, you know, where you actually came from, and that all this stuff right now and like doing the Chicken Licken ad and working with other brands, like Wasanga said, it's not like you're not like this new kid on the block. Like you've put in your hours and you've done your time, and you might get that perception of like, And I suppose for people maybe who are encountering like me or the work for the first time, it's understandable. It's like, okay, what's with like this? But like, yes, it has been a decade-long like journey. If I think, for example, from the time I started doing drama, there's definitely a sense of like being intentional in terms of the work that like I take on, and also balancing the existing commitments that I had in terms of voice work and also like the Sesame work that existed before like lockdown, you know. So I also don't want to, like, if I committed to something like last year or whatever, something that was going to happen this year, I'm not going to be like, I need to bang for my advert. I'm not going to be you know, like that person. So
it does take a long time to become an overnight success.
100%.
Like it doesn't happen overnight.
That is 100% it. And I've also been very fortunate. There's a guy, he's a friend of mine that we studied together at Rhodes. His name is like Spam Dagane. So he's effectively my manager now. And he comes from like a branding like background, branding and marketing. That's what he does like professionally. So we do kind of discuss things a lot and see what can be done. But also, I know, like, especially now as young people, there's this whole thing of, hey, secure the bag kind of thing, right? And I'm not gonna, money is important, especially like now and what this pandemic has done to like us, like as creatives, right? And live performers especially. So I'm never gonna like talk down on like, you know, opportunities to earn. But I am kind of very deliberate in terms of like, okay, does this work in terms of what you are asking of me? Like, am I really going to be able to bring, like, am I truly bringing value to you? Like who you are, like your company, like your brand and stuff? Sure. Or is this just a
payday.
Like kind of thing. So
and I think that speaks back to the inward self that you were speaking about earlier.
You spoke about that Dutch company. In terms of international audiences and your appeal, we always talk about getting that home support and then international support first. I always use the example of DJ Lag. He's huge overseas, and he's such a great guy. Like you, like when we first talked, I was like, you're gonna make it. Just your work ethic, how you are passionate and committed. How important is it to get that local support, and how is it different from the international support? Do they come about you? I mean, the internet has opened that quite a lot. We used to talk about opening up the industry, and then the argument from one person was that, dude, it's open. You need to take it. It's there.
That's a very interesting question, and like I think so. I'm a performer and stuff like that, and I think I stumbled into content creation in terms of like now during lockdown and things. And when that first video went out, okay, it was cool, but for me it was like, okay, why is this happening? Why are people responding like the way that they are? Like to these particular
Why this?
like it was genuinely curious as to why is this like happening? So, and then I started thinking of Uguti, okay, obviously it was very South African, like you stop nonsense and stuff. Then there was a conscious effort to make Bob an existing character, like an outsider who is observing distinctly South African. But when I made that choice, I understood Uguti in terms of resonance and relevance, it would be to a South African like audience, and I'm happy with that, like at the moment, because like that's very deliberate. And it's so interesting to watch other content creators from across the continent, like Elsa, for example.
Yeah.
She
I love her.
incredible. She's incredible,
insane,
right? Yeah. But her videos are so great because they speak more to like a general kind of like human kind of
Sentiment.
experience, human sentiment. So anyone in the world can like kind of like relate to that. So yeah, there has been like a focus, I don't know, to serve the South African audience at the moment. But I am quite aware of Uguti, if you not kind of include LinkedIn.
Shout out.
If you're not kind of clued up to the South African cultural experience, Uguti, obviously there's a lot that would go over your head. But mid to long term, I am kind of thinking about ways to kind of broaden like that. Like, but it's been very specific and very deliberate to speak to South Africans. Yeah.
You speak about how surprised you were with how that first video was like received.
Yeah.
Do you think that in terms of the fact that it was during lockdown, that the consumption of that content was based on the fact that everyone is sitting at home and almost have like basically nothing else to do? And I mean, when you spoke about Elsa now, she also came up at a similar kind of time. And like, do you think that maybe that was the hole that Sanele was talking about? You just penetrated it. I don't want to make the actual gesture. Like at the right moment, at the right time. And you were in the right place.
Yeah, I think timing. I definitely was like fortunate in that sense. Of Uguti, like we're all at home, and there's not much else to do. If let's say the pandemic hadn't happened in lockdown, maybe it possibly like could have taken off, but maybe not in terms of like maybe. Maybe the take up would have been slightly longer, like slower, just because there are other things consuming people's attention. But like I think timing was a huge factor.
Yeah, let's not take away from the fact that the actual content of what, like from the Guinya to the robots and everything. I mean, it's really quality stuff, and I love the way that like it's come from. Like taking that accent, obviously the outsider, and just resonating with South Africans. And I mean, and I guess that's where the opportunities have come from since then. It's just that it's like distinctly South African, like you mentioned earlier. And I really do appreciate that, and thank you for that,
guys.
Tyson.
Thank you.
I just want to ask, like, has anything tangible changed in your life pre as opposed to post Chicken Licken?
In terms of like
just whether it's being more recognized, whether it's your basically your visibility towards people, maybe opportunities started coming a little bit.
The red card.
Chief.
100%. Just because of like the scale of like that like campaign. And also, like being like recognized. Generally, I tend not to leave the house unless I have to.
Oh, is this you now?
No, because of the pandemic. What else is it?
I'm sure we can do another one.
Like people. I mean, it's been great. Like the support and the. Yeah, man, and also I'm very proud of like where I grew up. Like I'm from Diepkloof and stuff, right? And so people from Diepkloof like being like, "Oh, you're that guy from like here."
One of us.
Yeah. Because I've also have such a huge love for people who have like. For example, if I just think of Diepkloof as a microcosm or as an example, people like Apo Kabelo, Mabalani, you know, I'm so proud. I was like, that guy is from
I'm sorry,
Diepkloof.
bro, I have to say Dynamite Diepkloof too.
Dynamite, you know what I mean?
I love that shit.
So for people, I don't know, to feel like oh hey, like you're repping like the area well. And also like for my family, I'm huge on family.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and it's been like a difficult period like for the family, just in terms of like the health of like parents, and also the losses that we've suffered in the family. So it's been just a very kind of like proud moments. And also I think what it did in terms of tangible kind of changes was in terms of character driven, not to say it hasn't been done before, of course there've been plenty of character driven campaigns and work before, but for me, like personally, to get like my foot in the door, because also before the lockdown I still didn't have an agent. I had like the drama experience, I had this, that, but it was just like not interested, you know. So it was also an opportunity for the gatekeepers to be able to see it, would say, oh, actually he can do like a job. And something I'm definitely interested in now is, again, to keep on collaborating like as content creators or like artists, you know, so that like there's so many creative things that we could be just doing, or so many different ways of, I don't know, maybe brand communications and stuff. So we're just going to keep on
I just
like,
wanted to ask about the barriers, because for me, what you spoke about was so honest, and we're around the same age in terms of that convincing. It sounds like you've got a great support structure. For me, it was doctors, nurses, with all due respect, accountants, and that was the usual template. How do you convince, especially when you know that you've got black tax, all those kind of things? How do you convince your parents? Like, there might be people who are watching now who are in school, matric. How do you convince them that I can make this work? Your money won't be wasted. I'll make something of my life.
Sure.
That's a $1 million question.
Yeah, it is. And I suppose it depends, like, because, you know, families differ. Some families will be very hardline of like
you
know what I mean. And sometimes that means you might have to be, for a long time, and I think as creatives and even entrepreneurs, for a long time you are probably your own biggest believer, and when sometimes even the people around you aren't necessarily kind of sold, is this really like the thing, then it's in those moments that you are kind of still pushing through. And sometimes that means doing what you have to do before you can do what you want to do. I remember that was something one of my friends, Rhodes, kind of said of we have this idea of the things that I kind of like want to be doing, but also practically you need to be surviving, you need to be, you know,
pay bills.
But that doesn't mean even while you're doing those things, you can't be incrementally working towards your
passion.
Because whatever it is, whatever small thing it is that you're doing, working towards your
the bigger goal.
That bigger goal, it means something. Even if it means, you know, when I was still in the 9 to 5, I worked for like a research firm for some time, or also for an agency and stuff when I was still in 9 to 5. And Mangpuma, like I'm going to do my 5 minutes at Poppies kind of thing. All of that, those little things, it means something.
Definitely.
It might feel like small, but it really, really means something in the grand scheme of things. Like the process is the product, you know?
Right.
You spoke about collaboration earlier, and also I spoke about the Funny People Africa, which was like a whole host of comedians that were there. I also saw that you did an ad with Gumtree, which had like content creators and comedians in it.
South Africans have a lot of stuff.
Netways live means
Jimmy, hold on 2 seconds. Abatung, don't judge me. These things were gifts, man.
So when you're a presenter, you need a lot of shoes.
And there's nothing like an impending apocalypse to let us know just how much.
And like that's a beautiful thing in terms of the collaboration that you spoke of. I just wanted to know from yourself, who do you think is killing comedy right now?
Wow.
Or your faves?
My faves, just both locally and internationally.
We can go either way.
Oh wow! Sure.
We can be here for a while.
Oh my gosh, I love Pop Pop's comedy.
Yes.
I love Donovan Goliath's work. I was immediately drawn to Donovan's work because of what he does with characters, like even on stage.
Yes.
If you've ever seen.
Would you say he's a perfectionist?
A perfectionist.
Or he just gets it right consistently?
I just think he's Yeah, I don't know if he's a perfectionist. Probably he would be able to say whether or not he's a perfectionist. But in terms of, he's a craftsman when it comes to character. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and he's also like a designer, isn't he?
Yeah,
like, he's creative in himself.
Yeah, all round broad, super.
He painted a whole what do you call it? At church, the mural. He painted a mural.
Yeah, he's incredibly gifted in so many ways. So I look up to Celeste Ntuli, like
yes.
If you've ever seen like Celeste like live, oh my word, like. You wonder when a room explodes. It's like, I get goosebumps. I get goosebumps, you know. But the great thing about like creativity and like comedy and stuff is that like people do things in so many interesting and different ways, right? So the way a Kagiso Mogadi would dissect like what would be like the simplest kind of topic and like do it with insane comic timing is something that I try to like draw from, in the same way that I look at Jamie Foxx's and Eddie Murphy's character work on stage. You know, there's so many different things that I'm sucking from, you know, different like people.
And I think the introversion that you or introvertedness that you're speaking of made you super observant.
Yeah.
And I think that you swallowed that, absorbed it.
Yeah.
And and I guess you, with your own discretion, have used it to your own advantage.
There's always that sense of absorbing and soaking up like things.
Yeah, no, I think that's been quite insightful. Thank you once again, Tyson, for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing and experiencing all the wonderful things that you do. And to you, our listeners, thank you for the comments. Please do remember to follow him as well. He's available. You care to share some of your details? I think it's Tyson Ngubeni across platforms.
Across the platform.
He's got enough followers. It's
just putting it out there. Drop us a few. So you can like, share, subscribe, comment on our YouTube channel. Please check out our socials as well. On Facebook, we are available as well. On Twitter, check out Buzzsprout if you'd like to listen to the audio version of our show. It's also on iTunes and it's also on Spotify. And we be out.
Sharp.
Nice.